Introduction to Sociology, 3rd edition, an OpenStax textbook. This free audiobook is a public service of Los Angeles Harbor College. Register for in-person and online courses today by visiting www.lahc.edu. You can find this audiobook anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and more. Chapter 6: Groups and Organization.
Introduction.
Throughout the history of the United States, individuals have formed groups in order to achieve goals and bring about change. Some groups are loosely defined, while others have highly organized structure and mission. And, in some cases, groups can have significant influence on culture, society, the economy, and government. In 2009, people protesting government spending held a series of tea parties, referencing the Boston Tea Party, an anti-taxation event that led up to the Revolutionary War. Tea Party activists also opposed big government, high taxes, and political corruption, and supported gun rights and traditional family values. They called for awareness to any issue which challenges the security, sovereignty, or domestic tranquility of our beloved nation, the United States of America. The movement grew into a major political force, with chapters popping up in nearly every community across the country. By 2010, Tea Party candidates had won seats in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate, demonstrating the political power of the group and its message. As grassroots activism faded, the Tea Party gained influence within the Republican Party. Many of its ideas have been assimilated into the mainstream conservative movement and Republican Party platform. In 2016, highly successful Fox News host Gretchen Carlson filed a lawsuit against Fox chairman Roger Ailes for sexual harassment. The suit led other women to come forward with similar allegations against Ailes and others in the entertainment industry. Soon after, actress Alyssa Milano posted this statement on Twitter. "If all the women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote Me Too as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem." The phrase, Me Too, had been first used in this context in 2006 by activist Tarana Burke, in an effort to empower women of color. Within a day of Milano's post, the Me Too phrase or hashtag was used over 500,000 times on Twitter and was used in over 12 million posts by 4.7 million people on Facebook. Thousands of people, including other celebrities, shared their own stories of sexual harassment, abuse, or assault. The Me Too movement became the lead story on many newscasts and talk shows. Over the months that followed, the movement sparked reforms within companies and governments to combat sexual harassment and better support women. The movement inspired abuse victims to come forward and led to the sanction or removal of prominent individuals accused of serial harassment or abuse in academia, media, government, and other industries. The Tea Party evolved into an organization. From a loosely associated set of local chapters, it developed into several closely affiliated nonprofits, filed with the IRS, a political faction within the Republican Party, and a caucus within Congress. What about the Me Too movement? Burke started it in 2006 and was working to enact change long before the hashtag sparked more awareness and new policies. The Me Too has brought together people to work in groups, but it has yet to form into a permanent Me Too organization. As enduring social units, groups help foster shared value systems and are key to the structure of society as we know it. There are 3 primary sociological perspectives for studying groups: functionalist, conflict, and interactionist. We can look at the Tea Party and the Me Too movements through the lenses of these methods to better understand the roles and challenges that they offer. The functionalist perspective is a big picture macro-level view that looks at how different aspects of society are intertwined. This perspective is based on the idea that society is a well-balanced system with all parts necessary to the whole, and it studies the roles these parts play in relation to the whole. A functionalist might look at the macro-level needs that each movement serves. For example, a structural functionalist might ask how the Tea Party arose to voice the concerns of a large sector of society that felt politically underrepresented, or how Me Too drove people to pay attention to sexual harassment and gender inequality. This approach might look at how each group enabled the voicing of discontent and so stabilized society. The conflict perspective is another macroanalytical view, one that focuses on the genesis and growth of inequality. A conflict theorist studying the Tea Party movement might look at how it checked interests that have manipulated the political system over the last 30 years. Or, this perspective might explore how Me Too challenged organizations that have allowed sexual harassment to persist in order to protect those in power. A third perspective is the symbolic interaction or interactionist perspective. This method of analyzing groups takes a micro-level view. Instead of studying the big picture, these researchers look at the day-to-day interactions of groups. Studying these details, the interactionist looks at issues like leadership style and group dynamics. In the case of the Tea Party movement, interactionists might ask, how does the Tea Party dynamic in New York differ from that in Atlanta? Or, in the case of the Me Too, researchers may seek to learn about who defines the agenda and approach within the movement.
6.1 Types of Groups. Learning Objectives. By the end of this section, you should be able to differentiate between primary and secondary groups, recognize in-groups and out-groups as subtypes of primary and secondary groups, define reference groups.
Most of us feel comfortable using the word group without giving it much thought. Often, we mean different things when using that word. We might say that a group of kids all saw the dog, and it could mean 250 students in a lecture hall or 4 siblings playing on a front lawn. In everyday use, it can be a generic term, although it carries important clinical and scientific meanings. Moreover, the concept of a group is central to much of how we think about society and human interaction. So how can we hone the meaning more precisely for sociological purposes? Defining a group. The term group is an amorphous one and can refer to a wide variety of gatherings, from just 2 people. Think about a group project in school when you partner with another student, a club, a regular gathering of friends, or people who work together or share a hobby. In short, the term refers to any collection of at least 2 people who interact with some frequency and who share a sense that their identity is somehow aligned with the group. Of course, every time people are gathered, it is not necessarily a group. A rally is usually a one-time event, for instance, and belonging to a political party doesn't imply interaction with others. People who happen to be in the same place at the same time, but who do not interact or share a sense of identity, such as a bunch of people standing in line at Starbucks, are considered an aggregate or a crowd. Another example of a non-group is people who share similar characteristics but are not tied to one another in any way. These people are considered a category, and as an example, all children born from approximately 1980 to 2000 are referred to as millennials. Why are millennials a category and not a group? Because while some of them may share a sense of identity, they do not, as a whole, interact frequently with each other. Interestingly, people within an aggregate or category can become a group. During disasters, people in a neighborhood, an aggregate who did not know each other, might become friendly and depend on each other at the local shelter. After the disaster, when people go back to simply living near each other, the feeling of cohesiveness may last since they have all shared an experience. They might remain a group, practicing emergency readiness, coordinating supplies for next time, or taking turns caring for neighbors who need extra help. Similarly, there may be many groups within a single category. Consider teachers, for example. Within this category, groups may exist like teachers' unions, teachers who coach, or staff members who are involved with the PTA. Types of groups. Sociologist Charles Horton Cooley, 1864 to 1929, suggested that groups can broadly be divided into two categories: primary groups and secondary groups. According to Cooley, primary groups play the most critical role in our lives. The primary group is usually fairly small and is made up of individuals who generally engage face-to-face in long-term emotional ways. This group serves emotional needs, expressive functions rather than pragmatic ones. The primary group is usually made up of significant others, those individuals who have the most impact on our socialization. The best example of a primary group is the family. Secondary groups are often larger and impersonal. They may also be task-focused and time-limited. These groups serve an instrumental function rather than an expressive one, meaning that their role is more goal- or task-oriented than emotional. A classroom or office can be an example of a secondary group. Neither primary nor secondary groups are bound by strict definitions or set limits. In fact, people can move from one group to another. A group of coworkers, for example, can start as a secondary group, but as the employees work together over the years, they may find common interests and strong ties that transform them into a primary group. As we will discuss in the chapter on media and technology, even online networks of people with common interests can sometimes move from secondary to primary group status.
Sociology in the real world. Best friends she's never met. Writer Allison Levy worked alone. While she liked the freedom and flexibility of working from home, she sometimes missed having a community of coworkers, both for the practical purpose of brainstorming and socializing. Levy did what many do in the internet age. She found a group of other writers online through a web forum. Over time, a group of approximately 20 writers, who all wrote for a similar audience, broke off from the larger group and started a private invitation-only forum. While writers in general represent all genders, ages, and interests, this group ended up being a collection of 20 and 30-something women who all wrote fiction for children and young adults. At first, the Writers' Forum was clearly a secondary group united by the members' professions and work situations. As Levy explained, "On the internet, you can be present or absent as often as you want. No one is expecting you to show up." It was a useful place to research information about publishers, recently published books and authors, and industry trends. But as time passed, Levy found it served a different purpose. Since the group shared other characteristics beyond their writing, such as age and gender, their conversation naturally turned to matters such as child-rearing, aging parents, health, and exercise. Levy found it was a sympathetic place to talk about any number of subjects, not just writing. Further, when people didn't post for several days, others expressed concern, asking whether anyone had heard from the missing writers. It reached a point where most members would tell the group if they were traveling or needed to be offline for a while. The group continued to share. One member on the site who was going through a difficult family illness wrote, "I don't know where I'd be without you women. It is so great to have a place to vent that I know isn't hurting anyone." Others shared similar sentiments. So, is this a primary group? Most of these people have never met each other. They live in Hawaii, Australia, Minnesota, and across the world. They may never meet. Levy wrote recently to the group saying, "Most of my real-life friends and even my husband don't really get the writing thing. I don't know what I'd do without you." Despite the distance and the lack of physical contact, the group clearly fills an expressive need.
In-groups and out-groups. One of the ways that groups can be powerful is through inclusion, and its inverse, exclusion. The feeling that we belong in an elite or select group is a heady one, while the feeling of not being allowed in, or of being in competition with a group, can be motivating in a different way. Sociologist William Sumner, 1840 to 1910, developed the concepts of in-group and out-group to explain this phenomenon. In short, an in-group is the group that an individual feels she belongs to, and she believes it to be an integral part of who she is. An out-group, conversely, is a group someone doesn't belong to. Often we may feel disdain or competition in relationship to an out-group. Sports teams, unions, and sororities are examples of in-groups and out-groups. Primary groups consist of both in-groups and out-groups, as do secondary groups. While group affiliations can be neutral or positive, the concept of in-groups and out-groups can also explain some negative human behavior, such as white supremacist movements. By defining others as not like us and inferior, in-groups can end up practicing ethnocentrism, racism, sexism, ageism, and heterosexism, manners of judging others negatively based on their culture, race, sex, age, or sexuality. Often, in-groups can form within a secondary group. For instance, a workplace can have cliques of people, from senior executives who play golf together, to engineers who write code together, to young singles who socialize after hours. While these in-groups might show favoritism and affinity for other in-group members, the overall organization may be unable or unwilling to acknowledge it. Therefore, it pays to be wary of the politics of in-groups, since members may exclude others as a form of gaining status within the group.
Big picture. Bullying and cyberbullying. How technology has changed the game. Most of us know that the old rhyme, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," is inaccurate. Words can hurt, and never is that more apparent than in instances of bullying. Bullying often reaches extreme levels of cruelty in children and young adults. People at these stages of life are especially vulnerable to opinions of others and deeply invested in their peer groups. Today, cyberbullying is on the rise. Cyberbullying can involve sending threatening texts, harassing someone in a public forum such as social media, hacking someone's account and pretending to be them, posting embarrassing images online, and so on. A study by the Cyberbullying Research Center found that 28% of teens have been a victim of cyberbullying. Hinduja and Pachin, 2019. Severe bullying can lead to suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts. John, 2018. Researchers noted that students who experienced in-person and online bullying were 11 times more likely to attempt suicide. Hinduja, 2018. Whereas bullying face-to-face requires willingness to interact with your victim, cyberbullying allows bullies to harass others from the privacy of their homes without witnessing the damage firsthand. This form of bullying is particularly dangerous because it's widely accessible and therefore easier to carry out. Cyberbullying can create a feeling of powerlessness and inescapability because victimization is not constrained to physical locations. Many victims report being harassed across multiple platforms or formats at the same time. Cyberbullying first made international headlines in 2010 when a 15-year-old girl, Phoebe Prince, in South Hadley, Massachusetts, died by suicide after being relentlessly bullied by girls at her school. In the aftermath of her death, the bullies were prosecuted and the state passed anti-bullying legislation. This marked a significant change in how bullying, including cyberbullying, is viewed in the United States. Now there are numerous resources for schools, families, and communities to provide education and prevention on this issue. Social media platforms and their parent companies are also taking steps, often under pressure from communities, to improve cyberbullying detection and reporting capabilities. According to a report released in 2013 by the National Center for Educational Statistics, close to 1 in every 3, 27.8% students report being bullied by their school peers. 17% of students reported being the victims of cyberbullying. Overall, LGBTQ youth are targeted at a higher rate than other youth, and members of minority populations overall are more likely to be cyberbullying victims. Hinjuda and Pachin, 2020. Finally, adults, particularly college students, are also frequent cyberbullying victims and perpetrators.
Reference groups. A reference group is a group that people compare themselves to. It provides a standard of measurement. In U.S. society, peer groups are common reference groups. Kids and adults pay attention to what their peers wear, what music they like, what they do with their free time, and they compare themselves to what they see. Most people have more than one reference group, so a middle school boy might look not just at his classmates, but also at his older brother's friends and see a different set of norms. And he might observe the behaviors of his favorite athletes for yet another point of reference. Some other examples of reference groups can be one's cultural center, workplace, family gathering, and even parents. Often, reference groups convey competing messages. For instance, on television and in movies, young adults often have wonderful apartments and cars and lively social lives despite not holding a job. In music videos, young women might dance and sing in a sexually aggressive way that suggests experience beyond their years. At all ages, we use reference groups to help guide our behavior and establish our social norms. So how important is it to surround yourself with positive reference groups? You may not recognize a reference group, but it still influences the way you act. Identifying your reference groups can help you understand the source of the social identities you aspire to or want to distance yourself from.
Sociology in the real world. College, a world of in-groups, out-groups, and reference groups. For a student entering college, the sociological study of groups takes on an immediate and practical meaning. After all, when we arrive someplace new, most of us glance around to see how well we fit in or stand out in the ways we want. This is a natural response to a reference group, and on a large campus, there can be many competing groups. Say you are a strong athlete who wants to play intramural sports, and your favorite musicians are a local punk band. You may find yourself engaged with two very different reference groups. These reference groups can also become your in-groups or out-groups. For instance, different groups on campus might solicit you to join. Are there fraternities and sororities at your school? If so, chances are they will try to convince students, that is, students they deem worthy, to join them. And if you love playing soccer and want to play on a campus team but you're wearing shredded jeans, combat boots, and a local band t-shirt, you might have a hard time convincing the soccer team to give you a chance. While most campus groups refrain from insulting competing groups, there is a definite sense of an in-group versus an out-group. Them? A member might say. They're all right, but their parties are nowhere near as cool as ours. Or, only serious engineering geeks join that group. This immediate categorization into in-groups and out-groups means that students must choose carefully, since whatever group they associate with might define their friends for several years to come. (6.2) Group Size and Structure. Learning Objectives. By the end of this section, you should be able to explain the ways that size influences group dynamics, differentiate among styles of leadership, interpret the impact of groups on individual behavior.
Dyads, triads, and large groups. A small group is typically one where the collection of people is small enough that all members of the group know each other and share simultaneous interaction, such as a nuclear family, a dyad, or a triad. Georg Simmel, 1858 to 1915, wrote extensively about the difference between a dyad, or two-member group, and a triad, which is a three-member group. In the former, if one person withdraws, the group can no longer exist. We can think of a divorce, which effectively ends the group of the married couple or of two best friends never speaking again. In a triad, however, the dynamic is quite different. If one person withdraws, the group lives on. A triad has a different set of relationships. If there are three in the group, 2-against-1 dynamics can develop, and a majority opinion may form on any issue. Small groups generally have strong internal cohesiveness and a sense of connection. Small groups may face challenges when trying to achieve large goals. They can struggle to be heard or to be a force for change if they are pushing against larger groups. It is difficult to define exactly when a small group becomes a large group. Perhaps it occurs when one group grows so large that there are too many people to join in a simultaneous discussion. Sometimes it occurs when a group joins with other groups as part of a movement. These larger groups may share a geographic space, such as a fraternity or sorority on the same campus, or they might be spread out around the globe. The larger the group, the more attention it can garner, and the more pressure members can put toward whatever goal they wish to achieve. At the same time, the larger the group becomes, the more the risk grows for division and lack of cohesion. Group leadership. Often, larger groups require some kind of leadership. In small, primary groups, leadership tends to be informal. After all, most families don't take a vote on who will rule the group, nor do most groups of friends. This is not to say that de facto leaders don't emerge, but formal leadership is rare. In secondary groups, leadership is usually more overt. They often outline roles and responsibilities, with a chain of command to follow. Some secondary groups, like the military, have highly structured and clearly understood chains of command, and sometimes lives depend on those. After all, how well could soldiers function in a battle if different people were calling out orders, and if they had no idea whom to listen to? Other secondary groups, like a workplace or a classroom, also have formal leaders, but the styles and functions of leadership can vary significantly. Leadership function refers to the main goal of the leader, which may be instrumental or expressive. An instrumental leader is one who is goal-oriented and largely concerned with accomplishing set tasks. We can imagine that an Army general or a Fortune 500 CEO would be an instrumental leader. In contrast, expressive leaders are more concerned with promoting emotional strength and health, and ensuring that people feel supported. Social and religious leaders, rabbis, priests, imams, directors of youth homes, and social service programs are often perceived as expressive leaders. Sometimes people expect men to take on instrumental roles and women to assume expressive roles. Women and men who exhibit the other gender manner can be seen as deviants and can encounter resistance. Yet, both men and women prefer leaders who use a combination of expressive and instrumental leadership. Sociologists recognize 3 leadership styles. Democratic leaders encourage group participation in all decision-making. They work hard to build consensus before choosing a course of action and moving forward. This type of leader is particularly common, for example, in a club where the members vote on which activities or projects to pursue. Democratic leaders can be well liked, but there is often a danger that decisions will proceed slowly since consensus building is time-consuming. A further risk is that group members might pick sides and entrench themselves into opposing factions rather than reaching a solution. In contrast, a laissez-faire, French for leave it alone, leader is hands-off, allowing group members to self-manage and make their own decisions. An example of this kind of leader might be an art teacher who opens the art cupboard, leaves materials on the shelves, and tells students to help themselves and make some art. While this style can work well with highly motivated and mature participants who have clear goals and guidelines, it risks group dissolution and a lack of progress. Finally, authoritarian leaders issue orders and assign tasks with little to no feedback from group members. These leaders are often instrumental leaders with a strong focus on meeting goals. Often, entrepreneurs fall into this mold, like Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. Not surprisingly, authoritarian leaders risk alienating the workers. When decisions need to be made quickly or informed by a high level of expertise, however, this style of leadership can be required. In different circumstances, each of these leadership styles can be effective and successful. Consider what leadership style you prefer. Why? Do you like the same style in different areas of your life, such as a classroom, a workplace, and a sports team?
Big picture. Women political candidates. Kamala Harris broke a significant barrier when she became the first woman and first person of Black and South Asian descent to be elected Vice President of the United States. A prominent presidential candidate in her own right during the 2020 primary election, Harris was asked by then-candidate Joe Biden to be his running mate in order to secure his electoral victory. You may be surprised, however, to learn that more than 10 other women were on the ballot for president or vice president on November 3, 2020. Many were not on the ballot in every state, and at least one, Ricky Sue King, actually encouraged people not to vote for her. Shirley Chisholm, Lenora Fulani, Jill Stein, Hillary Clinton, and many other women have been candidates, but the United States has yet to elect a woman to the presidency. Researchers and political analysts have long established that gender plays a significant role in how political leaders, both candidates and elected officials, are perceived. As a starting point, research indicates that, even among women, the public prefer masculine qualities in presidents. For example, a study in which subjects completed the BEM sex role inventory and implicit leadership inventory found that the hypothetical ideal president possessed more masculine qualities than feminine qualities. Powell and Butterfield, 2011. Beyond the implicit preference toward masculine qualities, women candidates face what is sometimes referred to the likability trap. Essentially, the public expects and prefers certain qualities from its leaders, and also expects and prefers certain qualities based on the candidate's gender. For women presidential candidates, these expectations often conflict. For example, when a male candidate ranks low on feminine qualities, their likability is not significantly affected. But when a female candidate, like Hillary Clinton, ranks low on feminine qualities, their likability is significantly impacted. Interestingly, the same survey found that Kamala Harris had a much more balanced gender quality rating than Clinton did. The researchers qualified that since Kamala Harris ran for vice president, rather than president, the ratings cannot be directly compared to Clinton's. This difference, though, may indicate why many women are elected to legislative and gubernatorial roles, but not to the presidency. Conroy, Martin, and Nadler, 2020. These same perceptions present themselves in the workplace. Prescriptive stereotypes, that is, ideas about how men or women should behave, limit women's advancement to leadership positions. Men are often appreciated for being ambitious, while women who exhibit assertive behavior are generally perceived as selfish or overly competitive. Baldoni, 2020. Furthermore, when men help out in the workplace, their contribution is appreciated while the same task carried out by women goes unacknowledged. Scholars observe that women are underrepresented in the top levels of U.S. businesses and Fortune 500 companies. Heilman, 2012.
Conformity. We all like to fit in to some degree. Likewise, if we want to stand out, then we want to choose how we stand out and for what reasons. For example, a person who loves cutting-edge fashion might dress in thought-provoking new styles to set a new trend. Conformity is the extent to which an individual complies with group norms or expectations. As you might recall, we use reference groups to assess and understand how to act, to dress, and to behave. Not surprisingly, young people are particularly aware of who conforms and who does not. A high school boy whose mother makes him wear ironed button-down shirts might protest that everyone else wears t-shirts, and he will look stupid. Another high school boy might like wearing those shirts as a way of standing out. How much do you enjoy being noticed? Do you consciously prefer to conform to group norms so as not to be singled out? Are there people in your class who immediately come to mind when you think about those who don't want to conform? Psychologist Solomon Asch, 1907 to 1996, conducted experiments that illustrated how great the pressure to conform is, specifically within a small group. Read about his work in the sociological research feature and consider what you would do in Ash's experiment. Would you speak up? What would help you speak up? And what would discourage it?
Sociological research, conforming to expectations. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch sat a small group of about 8 people around a table. Only one of the people sitting there was the true subject. The rest were associates of the experimenter. However, the subject was led to believe that the others were all, like him, people brought in for an experiment in visual judgments. The group was shown 2 cards, the first card with a single vertical line, and the second card with 3 vertical lines differing in length. The experimenter polled the group and asked each participant one at a time which line on the second card matched up with the line on the first card. However, this was not really a test of visual judgment. Rather, it was Asch's study on the pressures of conformity. He was curious to see what the effect of multiple wrong answers would be on the subject, who presumably was able to tell which lines matched. In order to test this, Asch had each planted respondent answer in a specific way. The subject was seated in such a way that he had to hear almost everyone else's answers before it was his turn. Sometimes the non-subject members would unanimously choose an answer that was clearly wrong. So what was the conclusion? Asch found that 37 out of 50 test subjects responded with an obviously erroneous answer at least once, when faced by a unanimous wrong answer from the rest of the group. The subject conformed to a mean of 4 of the staged answers. Asch revised the study and repeated it, wherein the subject still heard the staged wrong answers, but was allowed to write down his answer rather than speak it aloud. In this version, the number of examples of conformity, giving an incorrect answer so as not to contradict the group, fell by 2/3. He also found that group size had an impact on how much pressure the subject felt to conform. The results showed that speaking up when only one other person gave an erroneous answer was far more common than when 5 or 6 people defended the incorrect position. Finally, Asch discovered that people were far more likely to give the correct answer in the face of near-unanimous consent if they had a single ally. If even one person in the group also dissented, the subject conformed only a quarter as often. Clearly, it was easier to be a minority of 2 than a minority of 1. Asch concluded that there are 2 main causes for conformity. People want to be liked by the group, or they believe the group is better informed than they are. He found his study results disturbing. To him, they revealed that intelligent, well-educated people would, with very little coaxing, go along with an untruth. He believed this result highlighted real problems with the education system and values in our society. Asch, 1956. Stanley Milgram, a Yale psychologist, had similar results in his experiment that is now known simply as the Milgram experiment. In 1962, Milgram found that research subjects were overwhelmingly willing to perform acts that directly conflicted with their consciences when directed by a person of authority. In the experiment, subjects were willing to administer painful, even supposedly deadly shocks to others who answered questions incorrectly. To learn more about similar research, visit www.prisonexp.org.
The bystander effect and diffusion of responsibility. Social psychologists have recognized that other people's presence influences our behavior, whether we are aware of it or not. One example is the bystander effect, a situation in which people are less likely to interfere during an emergency or when a social norm is being violated if there are others around. They feel less responsible because of the presence of other bystanders. This is known as diffusion of responsibility. Most of the time, people report that they don't want to get involved, and that's why they don't respond when they see something wrong. They assume someone else will step up and help. Researchers have found that people are less likely to help if they don't know the victim. Think about it this way: you're walking to class, and there are several students around. Someone falls on the ground, having a seizure. What would you do? The bystander effect suggests that unless you know the person who has fallen, you are more likely to walk away than help. However, social psychologists believe that you are much more likely to help, or at least stop and check, if you are the only one around.
6.3 Formal Organizations, Learning Objectives. By the end of this section, you should be able to distinguish the types of formal organizations, recognize the characteristics of bureaucracies, identify the impact of the McDonaldization of society.
A complaint of modern life is that society is dominated by large and impersonal secondary organizations. From schools to businesses, to healthcare to government, these organizations, referred to as formal organizations, are highly bureaucratized. Indeed, all formal organizations are, or likely will become, bureaucracies. We will discuss the purpose of formal organizations and the structure of their bureaucracies. Types of formal organizations. Sociologist Amitai Etzioni posited that formal organizations fall into three categories. Normative organizations, also called voluntary organizations, are based on shared interests. As the name suggests, joining them is voluntary. People find membership rewarding in an intangible way. They receive non-material benefits. The Audubon Society and a ski club are examples of normative organizations. Coercive organizations are groups that we must be coerced or pushed to join. These may include prison or a rehabilitation center. Symbolic interactionist Irving Goffman states that most coercive organizations are total institutions. A total institution is one in which inmates or military soldiers live a controlled lifestyle and in which total resocialization takes place. The third type is utilitarian organizations, which, as the name suggests, are joined because of the need for a specific material reward. High school and the workplace fall into this category, one joined in pursuit of a diploma, the other in order to make money.
Table 6.1 Formal Organizations. This table shows Etzioni's three types of formal organizations. The first type of organization is a normative or voluntary organization. With this type of organization, the benefits for members are intangible. Membership is on a volunteer basis. When it comes to feelings of connectedness, there is a shared affinity among members. The second type of organization is a coercive organization. With this type of organization, the benefits for members are corrective. Membership is required. When it comes to feelings of connectedness, there is typically no affinity. The third and final type of organization is a utilitarian organization. With this type of organization, members receive tangible benefits. Membership is offered on a contractual basis. When it comes to feelings of connectedness, there is typically some affinity.
The structure of bureaucracies. Bureaucracies are an ideal type of formal organization. By ideal, sociologists don't mean best. Rather, bureaucracies have a collection of characteristics that most of them exhibit. Pioneer sociologist Max Weber characterized a bureaucracy as having a hierarchy of authority, a clear division of labor, explicit rules, and impersonality. People often complain about bureaucracies, declaring them slow, rule-bound, difficult to navigate, and unfriendly. Let's take a look at terms that define a bureaucracy to understand what they mean. Hierarchy of authority refers to the chain of command that places one individual or office in charge of another, who in turn must answer to her own superiors. For example, as an employee at Walmart, your shift manager assigns you tasks. Your shift manager answers to his store manager, who must answer to her regional manager, and so on, up to the CEO, who must answer to the board members, who in turn answer to the stockholders. Everyone in this bureaucracy follows the chain of command. Bureaucracies have a clear division of labor. Each individual has a specialized task to perform. For example, at a university, psychology professors teach psychology, but they do not attempt to provide students with financial aid forms. The Office of Admissions often takes on this task. In this case, it is a clear and common-sense division. But what about in a restaurant where food is backed up in the kitchen and a hostess is standing nearby texting on her phone? Her job is to seat customers, not to deliver food. Is this a smart division of labor? Bureaucracies have explicit rules, rules that are outlined, written down, and standardized. For example, at your college or university, the student guidelines are contained within the student handbook. As technology changes and campuses encounter new concerns like cyberbullying, identity theft, and other problems that arise, organizations scramble to ensure their explicit rules cover these emerging issues. Finally, bureaucracies are also characterized by impersonality, which takes personal feelings out of professional situations. This characteristic grew, to some extent, out of a desire to avoid nepotism, backroom deals, and other types of favoritism, while simultaneously protecting customers and others served by the organization. Impersonality bureaucracies can effectively and efficiently serve volumes of customers quickly. However, explicit rules, clear division of labor, and a strict hierarchy of authority does not allow them to easily adjust to unique or new situations. As a result, customers frequently complain that stores with bureaucratic structures, like Walmart, care little about individuals, other businesses, and the community at large. Bureaucracies are often meritocracies, meaning that hiring and promotion is based on proven and documented skills, rather than on nepotism or random choice. In order to get into a prestigious college, you need to perform well on the SAT and have an impressive transcript. In order to become a lawyer and represent clients, you must graduate law school and pass the state bar exam. Of course, there are many well-documented examples of success by those who did not proceed through traditional meritocracies. Think about technology companies with founders who dropped out of college, or performers who became famous after a YouTube video went viral. In addition, organizations that aspire to become meritocracies encounter challenges. How well do you think established meritocracies identify talent? Wealthy families hire tutors, interview coaches, test prep services, and consultants to help their kids get into the best schools. This starts as early as kindergarten in New York City, where competition for the most highly regarded schools is especially fierce. Are these schools, many of which have copious scholarship funds that are intended to make the school more democratic, really offering all applicants a fair shake? There are several positive aspects of bureaucracies. They are intended to improve efficiency, ensure equal opportunities, and serve a large population. And there are times when rigid hierarchies are needed. But remember that many of our bureaucracies grew large at the same time that our school model was developed during the Industrial Revolution. Young workers were trained, and organizations were built for mass production, assembly line work, and factory jobs. In these scenarios, a clear chain of command was critical. Now, in the information age, this kind of rigid training and adherence to protocol can actually decrease both productivity and efficiency. Today's workplace requires a faster pace, more problem-solving, and a flexible approach to work. Too much adherence to explicit rules and a division of labor can leave an organization behind. And unfortunately, once established, bureaucracies can take on a life of their own. Maybe you have heard the expression, trying to turn a tanker around mid-ocean, which refers to the difficulties of changing direction with something large and set in its ways. State governments and current budget crises are examples of this challenge. It is almost impossible to make quick changes, leading states to fail, year after year, to address increasingly unbalanced budgets. Finally, bureaucracies grew as institutions at a time when privileged white males held all the power. While ostensibly based on meritocracy, bureaucracies can perpetuate the existing balance of power by only recognizing the merit in traditionally male and privileged paths. Michaels suggested that all large organizations are characterized by the iron rule of oligarchy, wherein an entire organization is ruled by a few elites. Do you think this is true? Can a large organization be collaborative? The McDonaldization of society refers to the increasing presence of the fast food business model in common social institutions, including government, education, and even relationships. The term itself isn't widely used in publications, research, or common conversation, but its effects are very familiar, even commonplace. The McDonald's model includes efficiency, the division of labor, predictability, calculability, and control monitoring. For example, in your average chain grocery store, people at the register check out customers while stockers keep the shelves full of goods and deli workers slice meats and cheese to order. Efficiency. Whenever you enter a store within that grocery chain, you receive the same type of goods, see the same store organization, and find the same brands at the same prices. Predictability. You will find that goods are sold by the pound, so that you can weigh your fruit and vegetable purchase rather than simply guessing at the price for that bag of onions. The employees use a time card to calculate their hours and receive overtime pay. Calculability. Finally, you will notice that all store employees are wearing a uniform and usually a name tag so that they can be easily identified. There are security cameras to monitor the store, and some parts of the store, such as the stockroom, are generally considered off-limits to customers' control. This approach is so common in chain stores that you might not even notice it. In fact, if you went to a large chain restaurant or a store like Walmart, seeing a worker or a process that didn't have these uniform characteristics would seem odd. While McDonaldization has resulted in improved profits and an increased availability of various goods and services to more people worldwide, it has also reduced the variety of goods available in the marketplace while rendering available products uniform, generic, and bland. Think of the difference between a mass-produced shoe and one made by a local cobbler, between a chicken from a family-owned farm and a corporate grower, or between a cup of coffee from the local diner and one from Starbucks. Some more contemporary efforts can be referred to as de-McDonaldization, farmers markets, microbreweries, and various do-it-yourself trends. And with recent advertising and products emphasizing individuality, even McDonald's seems to be de-McDonaldizing itself. The corporate impact of this phenomenon is interesting on its own, but sociologists and ordinary citizens are often more concerned about its echoes in other areas of society. A primary example, discussed extensively later on in this text, is education. Curricula and teaching practices were long the domain of local districts under state guidance. Some experts felt that this led to both inefficiency and underperformance. Starting in the 1990s, and especially in the early 2000s with the No Child Left Behind law, national standards began to override local approaches. But the desired outcome, improved education, is difficult to measure and far more difficult to achieve. Due to funding gaps, difficult standards, and intense public and local government opposition, the law was largely seen as having limited impact and was eventually phased out. Healthcare has also gone to a mass production and efficiency model. As you will explore later in the text, U.S. healthcare providers and insurers faced overwhelming increases in demand, partly the result of America's aging and less healthy population. In the 1990s, providers consolidated in what was called hospital merger mania. Local hospitals and even small doctors' offices were merged or acquired by larger systems. The trend continued with new growth in providers like urgent care offices. Other efficiency and standardization methods include telemedicine, new types of healthcare professionals, insurance mandates, and artificial intelligence.
Sociology in the real world. Secrets of the McJob. We often talk about bureaucracies disparagingly, and no organization takes more heat than fast food restaurants. Several books and movies, such as Fast Food Nation, The Dark Side of the All-American Meal by Eric Schossler, paint an ugly picture of what goes in, what goes on, and what comes out of fast food chains. From their environmental impact to their role in the U.S. obesity epidemic, fast food chains are connected to numerous societal ills. Furthermore, Working at a fast food restaurant is often disparaged, and even referred to dismissively as having a mech job, rather than a real job. But business school professor Jerry Newman went undercover and worked behind the counter at 7 fast food restaurants to discover what really goes on there. His book, My Secret Life on the McJob, documents his experience. Unlike Schossler, Newman found that these restaurants offer much good alongside the bad. Specifically, he asserted that the employees were honest and hardworking, that management was often impressive, and that the jobs required a lot more skill and effort than most people imagined. In the book, Newman cites a pharmaceutical executive who says a fast food service job on an applicant's resume is a plus, because it indicates the employee is reliable and can handle pressure. Businesses like Chipotle, Panera, and Costco attempt to combat many of the effects of McDonaldization. In fact, Costco is known for paying its employees an average of $20 per hour, or slightly more than $40,000 per year. Nearly 90% of their employees receive health insurance from Costco, a number that is unheard of in the retail sector. While Chipotle is not known for the high wages of its employees, it is known for attempting to sell high-quality foods from responsibly sourced providers. This is a different approach from what Schossler describes among burger chains like McDonald's. So, what do you think? Are these McJobs and the organizations that offer them still serving an important role in the economy and people's careers? Or are they dead-end jobs that typify all that is negative about large bureaucracies? Have you ever worked in one? Would you?
This has been Introduction to Sociology, 3rd edition, from OpenStax. OpenStax textbooks and this free audiobook are covered under a Creative Commons license. The full text is available at www.openstax.org. This project was made possible by the Los Angeles Harbor College Foundation. Los Angeles Harbor College is a public community college and your gateway to an affordable and outstanding college education. You can register for in-person and online courses today by visiting www.lahc.edu. Whether you are just starting your college journey, nearing graduation, or planning to transfer to a university, LAHC can help you achieve your educational goals. You can find this audiobook anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and more. Instructors can also download a course shell to embed these recordings in Canvas courses. Learn more by visiting www.openaudio.us. Did you find this audiobook helpful? If so, let us know by leaving a comment and sharing this recording with a colleague or a friend.